Imagine standing there at 4 p.m. just wrapped up what seemed like another ordinary day at the office. It was a day like any other until my teammate Nathan walked to our sponsor's desk with a smile, his laptop in hand, and declared, "Thanks for everything, this is my last day." Just moments before, our manager told us, "That's why we hire contractors, so we can cut them loose at a moment's notice whenever we want." I was left in shock. How could he do this? But what unfolded next changed everything for both of us. In the world of contract work, security is a fragile illusion. I had been a contractor for several months, working on various engineering projects, thriving in an environment where most had the potential for longevity despite a vague termination clause in our contracts. My team of 10 contractors operated under the supervision of a single full-time manager who, at times, acted more like a corporate overlord than a leader. The arrangement was simple yet unsettling. Our contracts stated they were expected to be for 12 months, but could end abruptly, depending on the employer's whims. This lack of commitment put us in a precarious position, constantly teetering on the edge of job insecurity. As contractors, we performed as full employees, dedicated and hardworking, yet lurking beneath the surface was the undeniable truth that we could be dismissed at any given moment. The reality of this fragile arrangement hit us hard one fateful afternoon. Our team was summoned for a meeting that felt ominous from the start. I had been the one to deliver the news to our 2 colleagues, who were blissfully unaware of their impending fate. Here I was, standing in front of people I had built rapport with, feeling the pain of a decision I had no control over. "This is your last day," I spoke, the words heavy in my mouth, as their shocked faces mirrored my internal dread. It was a bitter pill to swallow, one that made me question my own position and value. When Nathan, who was among the most capable engineers in our group, stood by my side, we shared a look that spoke volumes. Despite sharing in the collective shock of the news, Nathan's resolve remained unwavering. As we exited the room filled with palpable tension and resignation, I found myself grappling with the aftermath of our manager's callous words. I confronted Nathan about an inevitable question lingering in the air. Why hadn't our manager given any notice? But when we asked our sponsor, he responded brightly, "That's why we hire contractors, so we can cut them loose at a moment's notice whenever we want to." In that moment, the grounded reality of my situation crystallized like ice in my veins. It was a cold, stark truth. This wasn't merely a job. It was a game defined by survival instincts. I felt anger, frustration boiling inside me. To hear our sponsor express such a cavalier attitude made me reconsider everything I believed about my position in the company. Nathan, on the other hand, stood rationally calm, demonstrating a clear head in the face of uncertainty. As the days turned into weeks, I tried to control my anxiety over the precariousness of our employment status, clinging to the hope that our contracts would remain stable. The tension in the air was suffocating. Everyone seemed on edge, peering over their shoulders, wondering if they'd be next. But as I watched Nathan work, I could see something different in him, a quiet resolve. He was willing to prepare for the worst, and had no intention of becoming another statistic in the company's game of contractor roulette. I wasn't privy to the conversations he had outside of work, but I could sense he was assessing his options. Nathan began to keep a low profile, discreetly contacting companies, and lined up interviews outside of work hours. I admired his tenacity but couldn't shake off my own feelings of insecurity. Holding onto a false sense of stability, I remained entrenched in the comfort zone of our contract. It wasn't until Nathan announced his last day that I realized how deeply he had strategized his exit. My admiration for him grew as I watched him subtly execute his plan. On the day of his departure, while everyone else scrambled to meet deadlines and maintain a facade of normalcy, Nathan seemed calm and collected. The closer it got to 5 p.m., the more I felt a strange energy radiating from him, a sense of purpose that I longed for but found elusive. Finally, the clock struck 5. With a determined stride, he stood up, gathered his laptop, docking station, and mouse, items that had become so familiar to all of us throughout our work together. I watched as he walked over to the sponsor's desk. "Hey, thanks for everything. This is my last day," he said, his tone bright and casual as though he were merely announcing his lunch plans. My heart raced at the audacity of his exit. What would happen next? I felt both a sense of dread and exhilaration as I watched our sponsor's expression morph from surprise to confusion. "What, you're leaving?" our sponsor managed to stutter out, clearly taken aback. Nathan didn't waver. With a confident smile, he replied, "Yes, thanks," and walked out of the office. The finality of his words hung in the air like a thunderclap. At that very moment, I felt compelled to send an email notifying the team of his departure, almost as if I were in shock myself. Nathan hit send on a more official email at the same time, and the gravity of his exit settled into the room like a lead weight. The teammate who had kept things running smoothly was no longer with us, and the void he left was palpable. As days turned into weeks, the consequences of Nathan's abrupt departure began to unfold in a dramatic fashion. With many of his projects hanging in a delicate balance, it didn't take long before the cracks started to show. Our team found ourselves scrambling to fill the gaps Nathan had left behind. It turned into a frantic race against time, relying on collective memory and guesswork to stitch the project back together. I couldn't help but think how different things could have been if our sponsor hadn't been so delighted about being able to fire contractors at a moment's notice. The reality was that Nathan was irreplaceable. He held an exhaustive wealth of knowledge and insights about multiple projects. And now, with no one to guide the team, we were left grasping at straws, uncertain and disoriented. As I witnessed my team struggle to cope with the absence of a key contributor, I reflected on Nathan's decision and its cascading effects. I recognized that while Nathan's choice might have appeared rash to some, it was a calculated move that showed his commitment to his own value and future. Perhaps, in his own way, he was paving a path not just for himself, but for all of us who lived under the constant shadow of job insecurity. Each morning, as I arrived at the office, I was haunted by the reality of Nathan's decision. Wondering what could have quelled my own fears of striking out on my own, Nathan took control of his destiny when he walked away. I was left to tackle the fallout of his departure. I realized that while I wished to be bold, I allowed my fears to keep me stagnant, shackled by the notion of security in a role that offered none. With each passing day, the frustration built within me. I started engaging in open discussions with my other colleagues, sharing frustrations over lunch, hearing their own personal stories of dissatisfaction and instability. The chatter around the office shifted from unease about our own roles to a collective sea of dreams we had tucked away under the grind of daily work. At the end of the month, tensions began to rise. With Nathan gone, a noticeable void hovered over our team meetings, a silence filled with anxiety. The pressure to deliver grew heavier, and I knew we needed someone who understood the core of the projects. I began to ponder the attributes I admired in Nathan: his ambition, his foresight, his willingness to take risks even when faced with uncertainty. Reflecting on my own position, I began to realize that I needed to embrace my own ambition similarly. Nathan's bold move inspired me to consider what my next step should be. Watching the chaos unfold, I found solace in the understanding that now was the time for me to make a move of my own. The lesson was stark. I had been allowing fear to dictate my goals, but perhaps it was time for me to defy that mindset and focus instead on the opportunities ahead. Just 2 weeks later, I made the decision to start sending out my resume. I began to craft a cover letter that showcased my skills and the value I could bring to a potential new employer. Nathan's leap of faith became the driving force behind my determination. I realized that staying in a comfortable yet unstable situation wouldn't ultimately lead to growth or fulfillment, so why not take a chance on myself? The process of applying for new jobs became an enlightening experience. I honed my skills in interview preparation while delving into learning more about industries I had interests in but hadn't previously explored. Weeks passed, and the more I embraced this new journey, the more empowered I felt. I found myself growing with each application, each networking opportunity, and each conversation about the kind of future I envisioned for myself. Interestingly enough, as fate would have it, a company that specialized in engineering solutions reached out to me after seeing my online portfolio. They had been following my work and wanted to meet. I couldn't help but think that perhaps Nathan's audacity had set the stage for my own evolution, a ripple effect of courage inspiring others to embrace change. As I navigated through the hearing process, I found myself comparing my experiences with what I had witnessed with Nathan. Reflecting on my own journey, I understood the significance of having a proactive mindset, whether that was preparing for the worst or seizing opportunities that felt out of reach. The realization slowly dawned on me. I was no longer operating from a space of fear, but instead thriving in a space of empowerment. 1 month later, I was offered a new role that felt aligned with my goals and ambitions. I couldn't believe how far I'd come. In just a few weeks, I'd gone from feeling trapped in contract work to securing a permanent position that offered the stability I had yearned for. The sense of accomplishment felt incredible. It was as though I had transformed the fear that once consumed me into motivation that carried me forward. As I prepared to enter this new phase of my career, I couldn't help but reflect on Nathan's journey. His decision to take control of his narrative opened doors for me, and perhaps for others as well. The realization that we have the power to shape our own destinies drives home the value of taking risks, stepping into the unknown, and believing in what we can achieve. Change can be unsettling, but sometimes it's the very push we need to thrive. Have you ever found yourself in a similar position, weighing job security against personal ambition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, fortune favors the bold. So, what bold step will you take today?